In the wake of her grandmother's passing, 16-year-old Emily finds solace and purpose in training for a charity marathon. Her parents, Sarah and Mike, grow increasingly concerned about her frequent meetings with her coach. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room as Sarah watched her daughter Emily preparing to leave the house. At 16, Emily had always been active, but lately, her dedication to running had intensified. Sarah couldn't help but notice the determined look in Emily's eyes as she shouldered her running bag. "Heading out again, sweetie?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her tone casual despite the worry gnawing at her insides. Emily nodded, her ponytail bouncing with the movement. "Yeah, Mom. Coach David says consistency is key." Sarah glanced at the clock on the wall, noting it was already past 6 p.m. "It's getting late. Will you be back for dinner?" "I'm not sure," Emily replied, her hand already on the doorknob. "Don't wait up if I'm not. Love you." Before Sarah could respond, Emily was out the door, leaving her mother standing alone in the quiet house. Sarah's brow furrowed as she considered the frequency of these late training sessions. It wasn't just the lateness that bothered her. It was the intensity with which Emily had thrown herself into running since her grandmother's passing. Later that evening, as Sarah and Mike sat down for dinner, the empty chair at the table seemed to mock them. Mike pushed his food around his plate, his appetite diminished by concern. "She's out with that coach again, isn't she?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Sarah nodded, setting down her fork. "I'm worried, Mike. These training sessions are getting more and more frequent. It's not just about the running anymore. She talks about David constantly." Mike leaned back in his chair, his face etched with concern. Do you think there might be something more going on? I mean, he's not that much older than her, is he?" The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Sarah felt her stomach twist at the thought. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't shake this feeling that we're missing something important." As they continued their meal in uneasy silence, both parents grappled with their growing suspicions. The next day, determined to get some answers, Sarah decided to speak with their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who always seemed to know the local gossip. "Oh, David?" Mrs. Thompson said, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "He's quite the local hero, you know. Started that youth running program a few years back. The kids adore him." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her discomfort. "Emily certainly seems to," she agreed cautiously. Mrs. Thompson leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But between you and me, I've heard some whispers. Some folks say he can be a bit intense with his students. Pushes them hard, you know? Not everyone's cup of tea." As Sarah thanked her neighbor and walked back home, her mind raced with possibilities. David's reputation in the community was stellar, but these rumors of intensity only fueled her concerns. Was Emily being pushed too hard? Was there something more sinister at play? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she and Mike needed to take action. Their daughter's well-being was at stake, and they couldn't afford to ignore their instincts. As she reached their front door, Sarah made a decision. It was time to confront David and get to the bottom of this situation, for Emily's sake and for their peace of mind. The following weekend, Sarah and Mike found themselves at the local park, scanning the various groups of runners scattered across the grassy expanse. It didn't take long to spot Emily among a cluster of young athletes, her ponytail swinging as she stretched alongside her peers. At the center of the group stood David, a stopwatch dangling from his neck as he gave instructions. "There they are," Mike muttered, his jaw set with determination. Sarah placed a steadying hand on his arm, reminding him silently to keep calm. As they approached, David noticed their presence and called for a water break. The young runners dispersed, leaving him free to meet Emily's parents halfway. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," David greeted them, his tone friendly but cautious. "What brings you out here today?" Mike stepped forward, his posture tense. "We need to talk about Emily," he said bluntly. David's expression shifted, a mix of confusion and concern crossing his features. "Is everything all right?" Sarah intervened, her voice level but firm. "We're worried about the amount of time Emily's spending training. It seems excessive." A tense silence fell over the trio. David's gaze darted between Sarah and Mike, clearly sensing the underlying accusation in their words. "I understand your concern," he began carefully, "but I can assure you, everything we're doing is above board. Emily's dedication is admirable, especially considering her motivation." Mike's brow furrowed. "Her motivation?" David's expression softened. "The charity marathon," he explained. "Emily's training to run in honor of her grandmother. She didn't tell you?" The revelation hit Sarah and Mike like a physical blow. They exchanged shocked glances, pieces of the puzzle suddenly falling into place. "No," Sarah said softly. "She didn't mention anything about that." David nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry. I assumed you knew. Emily's been incredibly passionate about this. She sees it as a way to honor her grandmother's memory and raise money for a cause that was close to her heart." The tension in the air dissipated somewhat, replaced by a mixture of relief and lingering uncertainty. While the explanation provided context for Emily's intense focus, it didn't entirely quell Sarah and Mike's concerns. "We appreciate you telling us this," Mike said, his tone less confrontational now. "But we still have some questions about the training regimen and, well, the nature of your relationship with our daughter." David nodded, understanding evident in his eyes. "Of course, I'm happy to address any concerns you have. Why don't we set up a time to talk more in depth? I can walk you through our training program and explain how we support our young runners, both physically and emotionally." Sarah and Mike agreed, feeling a sense of cautious relief. As they watched David return to the group of runners, they saw Emily in a new light. Her determination, which had seemed obsessive before, now appeared touched with a poignant purpose. "We should keep an eye on things," Sarah murmured to Mike. "Just to be sure." Mike nodded in agreement. "Definitely. But maybe we've been too quick to jump to conclusions." As they turned to leave, they caught sight of Emily laughing with a fellow runner, her face alight with a joy they hadn't seen since before her grandmother's passing. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of the complex emotions their daughter was navigating. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Mike made a point of observing Emily's interactions with David more closely. They attended training sessions, spoke with other parents, and gradually began to understand the positive impact the running program was having on their daughter's life. Yet, a small seed of doubt remained. There was still so much about Emily's journey that they didn't understand. As they watched her push herself harder with each passing day, they couldn't help but wonder what other surprises lay in store for their family. The crisp morning air filled Emily's lungs as she jogged towards the park, her muscles warming up with each step. As she approached the meeting point, she saw a group of familiar faces gathered around David, their coach. Among them was a girl she hadn't seen before, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and determination etched on her face. David waved Emily over. "Everyone, this is Mia. She's joining our group today. Emily, why don't you pair up with her for the warm-up?" Emily nodded, offering Mia a friendly smile. "Hey, welcome to the team." As they began their stretches, Emily couldn't help but notice the quiet intensity radiating from Mia. There was something in her eyes that seemed familiar, a mix of determination and underlying sadness that Emily recognized all too well. "So, what brought you to our little running group?" Emily asked, trying to break the ice. Mia hesitated for a moment before responding. "My grandfather," she said softly. "He passed away a few months ago. He was a marathon runner, And I guess I'm trying to connect with him somehow." The words hit Emily like a physical blow, memories of her own grandmother flooding back. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know how you feel. I lost my grandmother recently. That's why I'm here too." Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Without another word, they fell into step together as the group began their run. As the weeks passed, Emily and Mia's friendship grew stronger with each training session. They pushed each other during sprints, offered encouragement during long runs, and found solace in shared moments of quiet reflection. One afternoon, as they cooled down after a particularly grueling session, Mia turned to Emily. "You know, sometimes when I'm running, I feel like my grandfather is right there beside me. Is that crazy?" Emily shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Not at all. I feel the same way about my grandma. It's like she's cheering me on with every step." Mia nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Running helps, doesn't it? With the pain, I mean. It doesn't make it go away, but it makes it bearable," Emily finished, "like we're carrying their memory with us, making them proud." As they sat on the grass, catching their breath, Mia reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn photograph. "This is my grandfather," she said, handing it to Emily. "It was taken after his first marathon win." Emily studied the image, noting the joy and pride on the face of the man in the picture. She could see echoes of Mia in his features, the same determined set of the jaw, the same spark in the eyes. "He looks amazing," Emily said, handing the photo back. "I bet he'd be really proud of you." Mia tucked the photo away carefully. "Thanks. What about your grandmother? Do you have any pictures of her running?" Emily shook her head. "No, she wasn't a runner, but she loved to watch me. She'd come to all my school races, cheering louder than anyone else." The memory brought a bittersweet smile to her face. As they gathered their things to leave, Mia hesitated for a moment. "Hey, Emily. Thanks for, understanding. It means a lot to have someone who gets it." Emily reached out and squeezed Mia's hand. "That's what friends are for, right? We're in this together." As they parted ways, both girls felt a little lighter, a little stronger. The weight of their grief, shared between them, seemed somehow more manageable. With each step they took in their training, they weren't just preparing for a marathon. They were honoring the memories of those they'd lost and forging a friendship that would carry them through the challenges ahead. The sun was setting as Emily made her way home, her muscles pleasantly sore from the day's exertion. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose, a feeling that extended beyond the physical act of running. She had found not just a training partner in Mia, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the complex emotions driving her forward. As she approached her house, Emily saw her parents watching from the window, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. She waved, offering them a genuine smile. There was so much she wanted to tell them, so much they didn't understand yet. But for now, she was content in the knowledge that she wasn't alone in her journey. The attic was thick with dust and memories as Emily rummaged through old boxes, searching for a photo album her mother had mentioned. Instead, her fingers brushed against something leather-bound and unfamiliar. Curious, she pulled it out, revealing a worn journal with her grandmother's name embossed on the cover. Emily's heart raced as she opened it, recognizing her grandmother's elegant handwriting filling the pages. She settled onto an old trunk, losing herself in the words of a woman she thought she knew so well. April 15th, 1975, Emily read aloud. Completed my first 5K today. The rush was indescribable. I may not be the fastest, but oh, the joy of crossing that finish line. Life is a marathon, not a sprint, and I intend to savor every step. As she flipped through the pages, Emily discovered a side of her grandmother she'd never known. The journal was filled with race records, training notes, and profound reflections on life and perseverance. Her grandmother, it seemed, had been a runner in her youth, a passion she'd kept mostly to herself. September 3rd, 1980, another entry read, "Another year, another marathon. Each one teaches me something new about myself. Today, I learned that my limits are only in my mind. When the body screams to stop, the heart whispers to keep going, and in that whisper, I find strength I never knew I had." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she read on, feeling a deep connection to her grandmother's words. The passion, the struggle, the triumph, it all resonated with her own journey. One particular entry caught her attention. June 12th, 1985. Met a young runner today, full of fire and determination. Reminds me of myself at that age. I see great potential in him. Perhaps it's time to pass on what I've learned. After all, isn't that what life is about? Running our race and then handing the baton to the next generation? Emily wondered who this young runner could have been, feeling a strange sense that this entry held more significance than she realized. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic, Emily clutched the journal to her chest. She had come looking for a photo album, but had found something far more precious, a window into her grandmother's soul and a wellspring of inspiration for her own journey. Descending the stairs, Emily found her parents in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The aroma of her father's famous lasagna filled the air, but Emily's mind was elsewhere. "Mom, Dad," she began, her voice trembling with excitement. "I found something incredible in the attic. Grandma's running journal." Sarah and Mike exchanged surprised glances. "Running journal?" Mike asked, setting down the spatula he'd been using. Emily nodded eagerly, opening the journal to show them. She was a runner, just like me. She did marathons, wrote about her experiences. It's amazing." Sarah wiped her hands on a towel and gently took the journal, her eyes scanning the pages with wonder. "I had no idea," she murmured. "Mom never talked about this." As they gathered around the kitchen table, dinner momentarily forgotten, Emily shared her favorite entries. The kitchen filled with laughter and tears as they discovered this hidden facet of a woman they thought they knew so well. "You know," Emily said, her eyes shining, "I think I understand now why this marathon is so important to me. It's not just about honoring Grandma's memory. It's about continuing her legacy." Mike reached out and squeezed his daughter's hand. "I think she'd be incredibly proud of you, sweetheart." Sarah nodded in agreement, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. "Is this why you've been training so hard with David?" Emily nodded. "Partly. But now, with this," she gestured to the journal, "I feel even more motivated. It's like Grandma is coaching me through her words." As they finally sat down to dinner, the conversation flowed freely. Emily shared her plans for the marathon, her training regimen, and her friendship with Mia. Her parents listened intently, their earlier concerns melting away in the face of their daughter's passion and newfound purpose. "You know," Mike said as they cleared the dishes, "maybe your mom and I could join you for a run sometime. Nothing too intense, mind you, but it might be nice to share this with you." Emily's face lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." As she went to bed that night, Emily placed her grandmother's journal on her nightstand. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, feeling more connected to her family's past and more excited about her future than ever before. The marathon ahead was no longer just a race. It was a tribute, a continuation of a legacy she was only beginning to understand. As the weeks passed, Emily's preparation for the marathon intensified. The summer heat bore down relentlessly, but she pushed through, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind during every grueling training session. One particularly challenging morning, Emily found herself struggling to maintain her pace. Her legs felt like lead, and each breath was a battle. Just as she was about to slow down, she remembered an entry from her grandmother's journal. "When you feel like quitting, remember why you started." With renewed determination, Emily pressed on, her feet pounding the pavement in a steady rhythm. As she rounded the final corner of her route, she saw two familiar figures waiting for her, her parents, decked out in running gear. "Mom? Dad?" Emily panted, slowing to a stop. "What are you doing here?" Sarah smiled, adjusting her new running shoes. "We thought we'd join you today, if that's okay?" Mike nodded, looking slightly nervous but determined. "Your mom found some old running shoes in the attic. Figured it was time to dust them off." Emily's face broke into a wide grin. "Really? That's awesome. But, are you sure you can keep up?" Mike playfully ruffled her hair. "Watch it, kiddo. We might surprise you." As they set off together, Emily adjusted her pace to accommodate her parents. To her surprise, they managed to keep up better than she expected. The familiar streets took on a new character as they shared the experience as a family. "So," Sarah said, between breaths, "tell us more about your training. How's it going with David and the other runners?" Emily's eyes lit up as she began to share stories about her training group, her friendship with Mia, and the progress she'd been making. Her parents listened intently, asking questions and offering encouragement. As they neared the end of their run, Mike spoke up. "You know, Emily, watching you today, it reminds me of your grandmother. She had that same look of determination." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the exertion. "Really?" Sarah nodded. "Absolutely. I see so much of her in you, especially now that we know about her running past." As they cooled down, stretching in the morning sun, Emily felt a sense of connection she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her parents' involvement, albeit in a small way, made her feel supported in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The next day, Emily met up with Mia for their usual training session. As they warmed up, Emily couldn't contain her excitement about her family run. "That's amazing, Em," Mia said, her eyes shining. "I wish my parents understood like that." Emily squeezed her friend's hand. "Hey, why don't you invite them to our next group run? Maybe seeing everyone together will help them get it." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, maybe I will." As they set off on their run, Emily found herself reflecting on how much had changed since she'd started this journey. What had begun as a solitary quest to honor her grandmother had evolved into something much larger, a way to connect with her family, forge new friendships, and discover strengths she never knew she had. The day before the marathon, Emily and Mia decided to do a light jog to the park, where they both had fond memories of their lost loved ones. As they sat on a bench catching their breath, Mia turned to Emily with a serious expression. "Em, I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. "Me neither, Mia. We're in this together, remember?" As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, the two friends sat in comfortable silence. Tomorrow would bring the challenge they'd been preparing for, but in this moment, they found peace in their shared journey. Walking home, Emily felt a mix of nervousness and excitement for the marathon ahead. She touched the small locket around her neck, a gift from her parents containing a tiny photo of her grandmother. With her family's support, her friend by her side, and her grandmother's spirit guiding her, Emily felt ready to face whatever the race would bring. As she drifted off to sleep that night, her grandmother's words from the journal floated through her mind. "The finish line is just the beginning of a whole new race." Emily smiled, knowing that whatever happened tomorrow, this journey had already changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. The morning of the marathon dawned crisp and clear, the city already buzzing with excitement. Emily stood at the starting line, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Around her, thousands of other runners stretched and jogged in place, their energy palpable. She scanned the crowd, spotting her parents and Mia's family holding up a bright banner with their names. The sight brought a lump to her throat. Mia appeared at her side, looking equally nervous but determined. "Ready for this?" Mia asked, her voice barely audible over the crowd's chatter. Emily nodded, giving her friend's hand a quick squeeze. "As ready as we'll ever be." The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, counting down to the start. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, picturing her grandmother's face, remembering the words from her journal. When she opened them again, a sense of calm had settled over her. The starting gun fired, and they were off. The first few miles were a blur of adrenaline and excitement. Emily found herself swept up in the tide of runners, the rhythmic pounding of feet on pavement, creating a hypnotic beat. She and Mia stayed close, occasionally exchanging encouraging glances. As they passed the 10-mile mark, Emily began to feel the strain. Her breath came in short gasps, and her legs burned with each step. She thought of slowing down, maybe even stopping for a moment, when she caught sight of her parents in the crowd of spectators. Their faces beamed with pride, and she found a second wind. "You've got this, Emily." Her father's voice cut through the noise. "Run your own race." Those words, so similar to what she'd read in her grandmother's journal, spurred her on. The halfway point came and went. Emily's world had narrowed to the path ahead. The rhythmic in and out of her breath, the steady beat of her heart. She barely noticed as they entered the park where she and Mia had shared so many training runs. It was there, surrounded by the familiar trees and paths, that Emily hit the wall. Every step became a monumental effort. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. Panic began to set in as she realized she might not be able to finish. "Emily," Mia's voice cut through the haze. "Stay with me. Remember why we're here." Emily turned to see Mia beside her, looking equally exhausted, but determined. In that moment, she saw not just her friend, but a reflection of her own struggle and determination. She saw her parents' pride, felt her grandmother's spirit. With a deep breath, she pushed through the pain. As they rounded the final bend, the finish line came into view. The crowd's cheers swelled, becoming a roar that seemed to lift Emily's feet off the ground. With a final burst of energy, she and Mia crossed the finish line together, hands clasped and raised in triumph. Exhausted but elated, Emily fell into her parents' arms, tears streaming down her face. "I did it," she gasped. "We did it." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, her own eyes glistening. "Your grandmother would be so proud, sweetheart. We all are." As the euphoria of the moment began to fade, Emily felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over her. She had pushed herself to limits she never thought possible, faced her doubts, and emerged stronger. The marathon wasn't just a race. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, friendship, and the enduring bonds of family. Later that evening, as Emily sat with her parents and Mia's family, celebrating their achievement, she realized that crossing the finish line wasn't the end of her journey. It was, as her grandmother had written, just the beginning of a whole new race. With the strength she'd discovered in herself and the support of those around her, Emily felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she fingered the medal around her neck, Emily silently thanked her grandmother for the unexpected gift she'd left behind. Not just the journal, but the spirit of determination and love for life that now burned brightly within her. In the days following the marathon, Emily found herself riding a wave of emotions. The physical exhaustion had given way to a deep sense of accomplishment, but there was also a hint of melancholy. The goal she had been working towards for months had been achieved, leaving her wondering, what next? One afternoon, as she sat in her room, idly turning the pages of her grandmother's journal. A particular entry caught her eye. November 15th, 1990. Completed my last marathon today. The finish line felt different this time. Not an end, but a transition. I realize now that the lessons learned in running extend far beyond the track. It's time to apply this endurance to new challenges in life. Emily sat up straighter, a spark of inspiration igniting within her. She realized that her grandmother's wisdom wasn't just about running, it was about life itself. Energized by this new perspective, Emily decided to channel her post-marathon momentum into other areas of her life. She signed up for an advanced placement class she had been hesitant about before, feeling a new confidence in her ability to tackle challenges. At school, she noticed Mia seemed to be struggling with the post-race blues as well. During lunch, Emily shared her revelation. "You know, Mia," she said, "I think we've been looking at this all wrong. The marathon wasn't the end goal. It was just the beginning." Mia looked up, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Emily explained her grandmother's words, watching as understanding dawned on her friend's face. Together, they began to brainstorm ways to apply their newfound endurance to other aspects of their lives. As weeks passed, Emily found herself pushing boundaries she never would have considered before. She volunteered to lead a group project in her history class, drawing on the teamwork skills she'd developed during training. When faced with a particularly challenging math problem, she approached it with the same determination she'd used to overcome the wall during the marathon. One evening, as Emily was working on her college application essays, her mother knocked on her door. "Hey, sweetie, how's it going?" Sarah asked, noticing the intense look of concentration on her daughter's face. Emily looked up, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's tough, but you know what? I'm kind of enjoying the challenge. It's like I'm running a different kind of race now." Sarah sat down on the bed, her eyes shining with pride. "Your grandmother used to say something similar. She believed that life was a series of marathons, each one preparing you for the next." As they talked, Emily realized how much her relationship with her parents had evolved. The marathon had not only brought her closer to her grandmother's memory, but it also bridged a gap she hadn't even realized existed with her parents. The next day at school, Emily overheard a group of younger students talking nervously about an upcoming 5K fundraiser. Without hesitation, she approached them. "Hey," she said with a warm smile, "I couldn't help overhearing. If you guys want some tips on preparing for your first race, I'd be happy to help." The students' faces lit up, and soon, Emily found herself sharing the wisdom she'd gained, both from her own experience and her grandmother's journal. As she spoke, she felt a sense of coming full circle. She was now passing on the baton, just as her grandmother had done. That evening, as Emily laced up her running shoes for a casual jog, something that had become a comforting routine rather than a grueling task, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The marathon had been more than just a race. It had been a transformative journey that continued to shape her life in unexpected ways. As she set off down the familiar streets of her neighborhood, Emily felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. With each step, she wasn't just running, she was carrying forward a legacy of perseverance, growth, and the unending pursuit of new horizons. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Emily knew she had the endurance to face whatever challenges lay ahead, one step at a time. The cool autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Emily jogged along her usual route, her mind wandering to the events of the past few months. The marathon seemed like a lifetime ago, yet its impact continued to resonate through every aspect of her life. As she rounded the corner near the local community center, a colorful flyer caught her eye. She slowed to a stop, her curiosity piqued. The poster advertised a youth mentorship program, seeking volunteers to guide and inspire local kids through various activities, including sports. Emily's heart raced, and not just from the run. This felt like an opportunity, a chance to share what she'd learned and potentially make a difference in someone else's life. Without hesitation, she snapped a photo of the flyer with her phone. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Emily couldn't contain her excitement. "Mom, Dad," she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I think I found something I want to do." She explained about the mentorship program, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. It's like what Grandma did, you know? Passing on what she knew, helping others find their strength." Sarah and Mike exchanged glances, a mix of pride and slight concern on their faces. "That sounds wonderful, honey," Sarah said carefully. "But are you sure you can balance this with your schoolwork and college applications?" Emily nodded confidently. "I've been thinking about that. Remember how Grandma wrote about applying the lessons from running to other parts of life? I think I can do this. It's just another kind of endurance, right?" Mike smiled, reaching out to squeeze his daughter's hand. "If anyone can do it, it's you, Em. We're behind you all the way." The next week, Emily found herself at the community center, surrounded by a group of eager but nervous-looking kids. As she introduced herself and began to share her story, she felt a sense of déjà vu, remembering her own first days of training. One girl in particular, a quiet 12-year-old named Zoe, reminded Emily of herself. As the weeks progressed, Emily watched Zoe slowly come out of her shell, gaining confidence with each small achievement. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging session, where Zoe had finally managed to run a full mile without stopping, the young girl approached Emily. "Miss Emily," she said shyly, Do you think I could ever run a marathon like you did?" Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She knelt down to meet Zoe's eyes. "Zoe, I believe you can do anything you set your mind to. A marathon isn't just about running. It's about believing in yourself and never giving up. And from what I've seen, you've got that in spades." As she watched Zoe's face light up with newfound determination, Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She realized that this moment of connection, of passing on the flame of perseverance, was what her grandmother must have felt all those years ago. Later that evening, as Emily sat at her desk working on a college essay, she found herself writing about her experiences, not just the marathon, but everything that had followed. She wrote about the journal, about Mia, about the mentorship program. As the words flowed, she realized she was describing not just events, but a journey of self-discovery and growth. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was her father, holding 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need a break," he said, setting one mug beside her. Emily smiled gratefully, taking a sip. "Thanks, Dad. I was just thinking about everything, really. It's funny how one thing can change so much, isn't it?" Mike nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. "Life has a way of doing that. Your grandmother used to say that every finish line is just the starting line for a new race." As they sat together, talking about Emily's mentorship experiences and her hopes for the future, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The marathon medal hanging on her wall caught the light, reminding her of how far she'd come. But more than that, it reminded her of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. With each challenge she faced, each person she helped, each goal she set for herself, Emily knew she was honoring her grandmother's legacy in the most meaningful way possible, by living life to its fullest, one step at a time. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Emily's last thoughts were not of past achievements, but of future horizons. The road ahead was long and unknown, but she felt ready to face it, with the endurance of a marathon runner, the wisdom of her grandmother, and the love of her family propelling her forward. As autumn gave way to winter, Emily found herself settling into a new rhythm. Balancing her schoolwork, college applications, and mentorship program had been challenging at first, but she'd approached it with the same determination she'd applied to her marathon training. Her days were full, but fulfilling in a way she'd never experienced before. One chilly Saturday morning, as Emily was preparing for a mentorship session, she received an unexpected call from David, her former running coach. "Emily," he said, his voice warm but tinged with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Could we meet at the park later today?" Intrigued and slightly concerned, Emily agreed. As she made her way to the park that afternoon, her mind raced with possibilities. Was something wrong with the running program? Had she unknowingly done something to upset him? She found David sitting on a bench near the running track, his gaze distant. As she approached, he looked up, a mix of sadness and fondness in his eyes. "Emily," he greeted her, patting the space beside him. "Thanks for coming. I've been thinking a lot about our time training together and, well, there's something I need to share with you." Emily sat down, her curiosity piqued. "What is it, Coach?" David took a deep breath. "You know, I've been coaching young runners for over 2 decades now, but what you might not know is why I started." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Many years ago, I was a lot like you, young, passionate about running, but struggling to find my way. And then I met this incredible woman who became my mentor. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She pushed me, encouraged me, and ultimately helped me become the person I am today." Emily listened, captivated. There was something familiar about this story, a resonance she couldn't quite place. David continued, his voice softening. "That woman was your grandmother, Emily." The revelation hit Emily like a physical force. She stared at David, her mind reeling. My grandmother? But how? Why didn't you tell me before?" David smiled gently. "At first, I wasn't sure if you knew about her running past. And then, well, I wanted you to find your own path, just like she did for me. Your grandmother always believed that the best lessons are the ones we discover for ourselves." As David shared more about his relationship with her grandmother, the grueling training sessions, the life advice shared over post-run coffees, the unwavering support through victories and defeats, Emily felt a new dimension added to her understanding of her grandmother's legacy. "You know," David said, his eyes misty with memories, "when I first met you, I saw so much of her in you. The same determination, the same spark. It's why I pushed you so hard. I knew you had it in you to carry on her legacy, even if you didn't know it yet." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I had no idea," she whispered. "All this time, you've been a link to her that I never knew existed." David nodded, reaching into his pocket. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling out a small worn envelope. "Your grandmother gave this to me years ago, with instructions to pass it on to you when the time was right. I think that time is now." With trembling hands, Emily took the envelope. Inside was a delicate silver charm in the shape of a running shoe, along with a handwritten note. "To my dear granddaughter, running has taught me that life's greatest victories are not achieved alone. This charm has been my lucky token through many races. Now it's your turn to carry it forward, not just in running, but in life. Remember, every step forward is a victory in itself. Keep moving, keep growing, and know that I'm always running beside you in spirit. Love, Grandma." As Emily clutched the charm, feeling its weight and history in her palm, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection to her grandmother, to David, to every runner who had come before her, and everyone she was now mentoring. She looked up at David, seeing him now not just as a coach, but as a living link to her grandmother's legacy. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." As they walked together around the track, sharing stories and memories, Emily felt as if she discovered a missing piece of a puzzle she hadn't even known was incomplete. The marathon, her training, her current mentorship. Everything fell into place with new significance. That evening, as she added the charm to the necklace that held her grandmother's photo, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just running her own race anymore. She was part of something larger, a relay of wisdom and perseverance passed down through generations. With this new understanding, Emily looked toward her future with fresh eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, college, career, life itself, she knew she was equipped to face them, carrying with her not just her own strength, but the collective wisdom and support of those who had run before her. As winter melted into spring, Emily found herself in a whirlwind of activity. College acceptance letters had started to arrive, and with them, a new set of decisions to make. The silver charm from her grandmother had become a constant companion, a tangible reminder of the strength and wisdom she carried with her. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Emily was sorting through old boxes in preparation for her eventual move to college, she came across a small, ornate wooden box she didn't recognize. Curious, she opened it, revealing a delicate gold chain with a locket attached. Her heart racing, Emily carefully opened the locket. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of her grandmother as a young woman, standing at what looked like a race finish line. On the other side was an inscription: "To Sarah, may you always run your own race. Love, Mom." Confused, Emily took the locket to her mother, who was working in the garden. "Mom," she called out, holding up the locket. "I found this in an old box. Was it Grandma's?" Sarah looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "Oh my," she breathed, taking the locket from Emily. "I thought this was lost years ago." As they sat on the porch steps, Sarah explained, "Your grandmother gave this to me on my 18th birthday. She told me it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations of strong women in our family." Emily listened, fascinated. "But why didn't you ever mention it before?" Sarah's eyes misted over. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm afraid I didn't appreciate its significance back then. I was young, rebellious. I thought your grandmother's passion for running was just a hobby, not the profound life philosophy I now understand it to be. I put it away, and over time, forgot about it." As they examined the locket together, Emily noticed something odd. "Mom, look," she said, pointing to a tiny seam along the edge. "I think there's something hidden inside." With careful fingers, they managed to pry open a secret compartment within the locket. Inside was a tightly folded piece of paper. Emily gently unfolded it, revealing a message written in her grandmother's familiar handwriting. "To my dear Sarah, and to all who come after, life is a marathon, filled with unexpected twists and turns. But remember, the race is not always to the swift, but to those who keep running. In this locket, I've hidden a truth that has guided generations of our family. The key to endurance lies not in our feet, but in our hearts. It's the love we share, the wisdom we pass on, and the strength we find in each other that carries us through life's longest races. May this locket remind you that you're never running alone. The spirit of those who came before is always with you, cheering you on. Run your race. Find your pace, and never forget the power of putting one foot in front of the other. With all my love, Mom." As Emily finished reading, she looked up to see tears streaming down her mother's face. "Oh, Mom," she whispered, wrapping her arms around Sarah. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The journal, David's revelation, the charm, and now this locket. They were all pieces of a legacy far richer and more profound than Emily had ever imagined. "You know," Sarah said, wiping her eyes, "I think your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that someday, when the time was right, all of these pieces would come together." Emily nodded, a sense of awe washing over her. "It's like she set up a scavenger hunt through time, leading us to understand her message bit by bit." As they sat together, the locket between them, Emily felt a shift in her perspective. Her journey wasn't just about running, or even about honoring her grandmother's memory. It was about understanding the intricate tapestry of wisdom, love, and resilience that connected her to generations of strong women in her family. With college on the horizon and a world of possibilities ahead, Emily realized that she wasn't just carrying her own dreams and aspirations. She was carrying the hopes, wisdom, and strength of all those who had come before her. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Emily made a silent promise to herself and to the memory of her grandmother. She would continue to run her race, to face life's marathons with courage and perseverance. But more than that, she would ensure that this legacy of strength and wisdom continued to be passed down, a golden thread connecting past, present, and future. With the locket now around her neck, joining the charm in her grandmother's photo, Emily felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She was part of something bigger than herself, a relay race through time, carrying the baton of love, wisdom, and endurance forward into the future. As she helped her mother back into the house, Emily knew that while one chapter of her life was coming to a close, an even more exciting one was just beginning, and she was ready to run towards it with open arms, her heart full of the love and wisdom of generations.